Hello and welcome to Biden Time. I am Christian Bladt, joined by Tamara Brown. You can
Hello
see her
there.
right there, and Scott Moore, who
Hey everyone.
I've at this point 2 years in, you'd think I'd learn. Yeah, you point the wrong way to point to the person that you want. Obviously, even yesterday, I was thinking that there was a lot of ground to cover that would warrant doing a show today, and then even more so with the Supreme Court ruling overturning Roe versus Wade. And I think, Tamara, I'd like to give you an opportunity to react to it before Scott and I weigh in.
Well, we have a new mandate. We have government mandated childbirth is now part of policy to go into effect later this year. Government mandated childbirth, and it's. I mean, every time this topic comes up, it's very passionate on both sides. Whether you're, um, you know, pro-choice or pro-government mandated childbirth, but it doesn't. What I would like to see is somebody's mind changed. I would like to hear from somebody who was like, I used to be pro-life, but now I'm pro-choice, or even the other way around. I would like to see that because there doesn't seem to be any movement as far as communication, but the we have a Supreme Court that is the majority, the 5 justices were appointed by presidents who lost the popular vote. So the Supreme Court does not represent America, not just with this ruling, but with lots of rulings. Also, what's coming down the pipeline too. The Supreme Court no longer represents America, so it's difficult to believe that we have a functioning government right now, and this is just it's disappointing on so many levels. Even even if putting aside the human right, um, the assault on human rights that this is, just the fact that our government, the way that our government is working, and the way that um, a few individuals were able to make such a monumental decision that affects dire consequences of thousands and thousands of lives, and for who knows how many generations to come to. So it's devastating on many levels.
Yeah, I think that that's the way that a lot of people are certainly feeling, and I think from the legal precedent that was set, just yesterday, that the state of New York can't make its own gun safety laws. That states don't have that right, but states have this right. It's very inconsistent, and I think it's very telling that those two rulings come from the same 9 justices. And obviously, look, the 3 of us live in California, and our lives are largely unchanged by something like this, but you start to realize, I mean, I was just looking over at CNN for a second, and it almost looks like, something that you see at a movie. And it was breaking news, state laws banning abortion begin to go into effect now, basically. So you can obviously see, so many of the problems that, this will create for the the less fortunate. Obviously, I was talking to my wife about this earlier today. If a very conservative Republican congressman or senator or governor were to, I don't know, knock up their mistress, well, they would make sure she could get an abortion. But a family who's really struggling and wouldn't know how to feed another mouth, in a lot of cases, they won't get to make that choice. So it's heartbreaking on a lot of levels. It's of course disappointing, and there's also You know, you 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 just wonder. To Tamara's point, a lot of times when you have elections and you have things, you start to feel like, well, this is what the people wanted, but you don't really feel that this is what the majority of people wanted. It's just a few people who were able to game the system and figure out, I mean, there is you can make a point about the first two justices that Trump appointed, but you can certainly make the case that he shouldn't have been able to appoint the third one, considering that he lost, considering what the precedent was. But it's very messy to try to navigate, and I think just in general, people are angry, but more than that, I think a lot of people are just sad because they don't really know what they can do about it. Scott, I wanted to give you a chance to weigh in.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, it's not even just that it's devastating. It is infuriating, to Tamara's point, that six people have been able to, out of six out to three have been able to overturn a precedence like this that's been on for nearly half a century, through, like you said, gaming the system here. And I would say only one Supreme Court justice should come from Trump, because the other one, of course, was held over by Mitch McConnell. So he did that twice, with his hypocrisy. And it is very hypocritical when they're talking about banning abortions, but we see nothing from conservative politicians now about doing things to elevate life, and that's why we know exactly what this is. This is not about the sanctity of life. This is about control. And getting out of agreeing or disagreeing with that part of the ruling, or what you feel about abortion in general, it's dangerous precedents to overturn rights. That is a bigger issue, and to put it back into states' control, for something that had been nearly half a century as precedent here, is also dangerous, because now you have a very confusing patchwork of laws across the country, of states that'll be legal or not. And it makes it difficult. And as you said, Christian, to your point, is that it's not going to affect the wealthiest, because they will still be able to go and get abortions wherever they need to. It's only going to hurt the disadvantaged, and those are the women that are going to be hurt the most. Those are the ones that are going to end up going and getting dangerous abortions somewhere if they can't travel out of state. Like, for instance, Texas is the biggest state now, population and size wise, that is going to have no abortions allowed at all. And it's going to be minimum 700 miles for a woman to be able to go and get an abortion out of state. So you're making it difficult for those with very little means. And then those with very little means end up having a child that they can't afford. How is that going to be healthy for a child to be in that environment growing up? And then beyond that, let's be honest too. I was reading a lot today about, like, look, this is, a lot of pro-life people were saying, look, doesn't change anything, because if you can still go to other states to get abortions, and it's not going to be 50 state. But I 100% agree that's not true. The minute that Republicans take back control of all three branches of government, they will lift the filibuster to pass it through and make it illegal across the country. So if we think that they're going to stop here, that's also sadly mistaken. So they will bulldoze through the filibuster for this to be able to make it nationwide at some point too. So
Right.
it's a very
Just to
devastating and very
interject on
sad
2
day.
points,
Yeah.
ironically, it is probably not that important of an issue to most of the people that would put that into place. They just are
Yeah.
catering to the most mobilized portion of their very small electorate. But, this is where you get into the fact that, you have the same number of senators from Arkansas that you do from Florida and New York, and and also large conservative states as well. But also, to your point about just going to another state, obviously the state where we've already seen the most of this is Texas, and anyone who's ever been to Texas knows that you can drive 7 or 8 hours. Sorry, you could drive 7 or 8 hours and still be in Texas. You can drive 10, 12 hours and still be in Texas. It is not as easy to cross state lines as it is for people in the Northeast feel like, yeah, just go to another state. I could be there in 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I think that that it is and you're right too, Scott, in this idea that it's not like this is the end of it for the people, that this is, the elected officials, that these are the issues that they want. Earlier today, uh, President Biden commented on this, and he called it, I think, a grave error. Let's see what he said. He said a tragic error. My apologies. In the same headline, this was an update from the New York Times, mentioned that privately Donald Trump has called the decision bad for the Republican Party. I don't find myself, especially in recent weeks, agreeing with a lot that I'm hearing from the former president, but I could see that case for the fact that, I think a lot of the electorate is usually disengaged and, unenthusiastic. I think that's a big reason why you got Trump in the first place. And it's not a silver lining when things like this happen, but the result could be, mobilization, maybe not for the midterms, but you would think that it would at least have a thought on that. And I think when you start having those conversations, it's because of what I said earlier. You can be sad, you can feel helpless. You don't really know what you can work towards because this has happened. But it's like, all right, how do you get things into motion to try and undo it? Because you can't undo it today. That's not going to happen. President Biden can't have an executive action, executive order that's going to really, supersede this at the moment. When you hear that sort of thing, Tamara, what do you think about sort of interpreting the, what this could mean for, yes, people on the left, but maybe people in the middle that this is not the issue that it is for the farthest part of the right, that this is not something that they feel would be justified.
Well, real quick, I just want to say that the I think a large portion of abortions that do happen are used. They use the abortion pill, and so that is one thing that is still a possibility from being mailed from other states, because right now I just heard a segment where they were, states like Texas would want to prosecute a service provider who is mailing the abortion pill to somebody in Texas. But it's now under discussion what a state like California could do to protect a service provider who did do something like that. So just in talking about uh, having to travel within a state where this is banned and stuff. I just wanted to point out that
No, that's
there
a
is.
great point. And then also,
Mhm.
like, if Texas wants to prosecute people, well, who's going to extradite from a state like California to Texas? So you just have to not go to Texas, you
Mhm.
know. But you're right. I mean,
But my
making it as
point is,
difficult as possible, for sure. Yeah.
if there is something to make the people who are feeling very hurt right now, there's a couple things, which is the abortion pill will be um I don't want to say largely available. I mean, this is still, the people that are affected by this ruling, the people who are going to be hardest hit, just have such a lack of resources that it's hard to say. You can't just say, oh, this should be simple. It's largely available, but it is something that a lot of activists and a lot of pro-choice states are going to do their best to make it available to people who need it. So that is one thing where, I'm personally going to put my efforts towards. But um, to what you were saying, a question about w- where are we heading into the next election. I think I said the last time that we talked about this that one of the difficulties, even amongst the far right, the right, the middle, the right, and the far right, is that even if you are pro-birth, you there's divide amongst them about like where the exceptions should lie. There's definitely going to be instances. Let's say you live in the place where you live in the place where has the most absolute limited the strongest rulings against this, which, what would that be, Texas? There's going to be an instance where somebody who is a far right supporter of, absolute complete ban on abortion, 100%, no matter what. And then they're going to find themselves in a situation where their wife gets pregnant and has some sort of, it's ectopic pregnancy. There's some issue and her life is threatened. If this baby is born, she could potentially die. And then that person is going to find themselves in that situation. And, I don't know, then they might start thinking like, well, there should be one exception. And people who are pro-birth cannot land on the same page as to where the exceptions lie. Some people say, well, with the exception of rape and incest, or with the exception after 6 weeks, or if the mother's life is in danger, or complete ban all the way across the board, 100%. So because even for people who are pro-birth, they cannot land on a single ruling. That's why I think that there is a little bit of leeway there for lawmakers to this could become an issue that could help anybody who's trying to, I don't know, sway anybody who is even pro-birth but not 100% banned across the board. I think could maybe fall in line with any election promises. I don't know if I'm making sense.
No,
but
it does make sense. I think that the reason why the term pro-choice became so widely used is that there are plenty of people, for their own lives, they feel like, I wouldn't, or I don't want anyone in my family, but it's not my decision for other people. And I think that a majority of people are certainly open to the idea of choice. And it definitely becomes an issue that seems more important. I mean, right now, whenever I watch TV, I'm bombarded by ads that are telling me why we shouldn't have gambling apps here in the state of California, which you go to another state, every commercial is actually just advertising those. At least when I was in New York, that was the case. So that is an issue that seems very important to specifically the Native American reservations and the gaming. I personally think it's a terrible idea to have gambling be that easy. So I agree with them. But when you have an issue like that, like what we're talking about, like abortion, that reaches so many people, I do think somebody who's like, oh wait, when are we supposed to vote again? What are we voting for? I think it doesn't even mean, like an awakening of people taking to the streets and demanding action now. It is the more, just disengaged voter, people with opinions, but they don't think their vote matters or whatever. I do wonder if we might see some of that. Scott, sort of as we talk about that aspect of what something like this can do, do you think it's realistic to think that, to former President Trump's point, this being bad for Republicans in a midterm election that, is, what is it, 4+ months away, that seemed like an easy one? Did it just become a lot harder, or is that just wishful thinking on the part of Democrats?
Unfortunately, I think it's wishful thinking on the Democrats, because it's really only going to accelerate folks on the margins that are going to be really driven to go. The sad thing is, when you look at the demographics, the people that are most affected by it, the younger women and younger men that might, support abortion rights and everything, are the least likely to vote. And right now, there's a lot of other cross currents going on for the electorate, with inflation, gas prices, food prices, a lot of instability to the day-to-day pocketbooks for a lot of Americans. That's going to take precedence. But I do think in some of those moderate suburban districts, yes, in those margins, if it's close, it could tip it to the Democrats. So it may not be as bad for the Democrats in the midterms, but I don't think it's going to change a larger enough structure to be able to change, the House flipping to the Republicans. I've always said the Senate, which it is 50-50 right now, is sort of more 50-50 because the Senate is a lot tighter. And even before this ruling, there's a pretty strong opportunity that the Democrats could keep that razor thin control in the Senate anyway. So I don't think it changes the bigger picture right now, but it definitely will affect some of those around the margins and some of those more swingier districts. It will definitely potentially help the Democrats. So the Democrats may not lose as much. I think the bigger question is what happens in some of the states which is going to be a bigger thing, is with which people aren't really thinking about, because it's not going to change the dynamic of abortion, being illegal nationwide, at least for the next couple years. But what are some of those states that have Republican-controlled legislatures but Democratic governors that are kind of stopping that from advancing? So when you think about states like Kansas, for instance, Michigan, Wisconsin, some of those states that actually have governor races coming up, gubernatorial races, that if they were to flip to Republican, and Pennsylvania, that could then tip the scales on making more of those states have abortions illegal as well. So those are the things that folks need to think about when they're going out to vote too, is local races, of course, but then also thinking beyond control of Congress, who's going to be running and controlling government as your governor after 2022. And those are going to be the people that will effectively see where the balance goes on some of these other states and tipping to outlawing abortion completely or not. So that'll be interesting to see if those poll numbers shift at all. I mean, a lot of the states, it was still, Michigan, for instance, it looked like was going to continue to be Democratic, but Wisconsin was close. So those will be the polls I'll be curious to see in the coming days. And then from there, what are some of the other bigger states that have Republican control but might have more difficulty flipping things over, like Florida, for instance, because they have an obscure constitutional amendment in their state that essentially says that abortion is enshrined there. Is that going to be something that they'll be able to overturn? And that'll be something I'll be looking at the next couple months as well.
Yeah, I mean, the big talking point on the right, and not a bad thing to focus on of late, is inflation and the cost of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And again, when you talk about the inconsistencies, there's very little that you can actually, it doesn't change anything. But the solution to inflation apparently is a lot more mouths to feed and a lot more people on the system. And I mean, there's not there, you're not going to really look for logic and consistency throughout politics, and you can jump in the chat and give all sorts of instances of Democrats, but this is just what we're focused on today, where these things don't really seem to be adding up. And I think the reaction in the days and weeks ahead, seeing if there is any kind of movement for anything, but most likely I agree with Scott in the sense that I do believe that Republicans will take over the House, but the Senate always seems a little iffier. I don't even know what the the most that Republicans could pick up in the Senate. I don't know if you know off the top of your head, Scott, but it's
not very many, but just enough. I think 1 to 2
just enough.
seats.
Yeah, because I mean, it honestly,
it just needs
you got to get one. Really,
right.
That's really what it is.
Yeah.
So, but so obviously the earlier Supreme Court decision, which I referenced, which obviously a lot of people are upset in New York State. The governor spoke out against the Supreme Court ruling that New York, a lot of times people do think of it as just the part with the most people, which is Manhattan, which is the little tiny part at the bottom. The big rest of the state has lots of patches of maybe pink, but definitely some bright red as well. I think that to have that kind of legislation in a state like New York was probably very useful and protective in some of those areas. But the Supreme Court coming in and deciding that states don't have that right. States will get the rights that we want them to have. Obviously, Tamara, we always knew that this decision was looming even when we got that one. But so this can obviously be more disappointing. But to have that precedent set, I think, is definitely not something that is encouraging to people who are hoping for gun reform, which we'll talk about in a moment. But when you hear about decisions like that one in New York, basically striking down the New York law, what do you think that says to people who that is kind of their big issue is gun safety?
Again, the Supreme Court is not representing the people. They're not accurately representing the people. They're representing a sliver, a loud and outspoken and strong sliver, but a small sliver of America. And a sliver is still significant. We are a we're a massive country. It's still a significant amount of people, but it is not representing America, the court. So it's people are now saying that guns have more rights than a woman, which is true in a lot of ways. But people. I try to look at the situation of it. It almost seems to me that people on both sides of the gun rights issue and the abortion issue, it's not even like they're fighting for the actual policy in and of itself. They're just rooting for their team. They're just rooting for this ideology of the community that they are a part of, which is human nature. And most people don't think thoroughly enough to look into any issue. And this is both sides. I'm not saying this is just the right. This is both sides. Most people don't look into an issue enough to know really how they might feel about it. They're following their tribe, their community, the people that they feel that they are most in line with. And that's why I say too that, like, if people knew, if talking about abortion wasn't so taboo, and if people who were pro-birth knew how many people in their lives that they love and respect have had an abortion, that those are the types of things that might make them examine an issue that they otherwise don't really examine that closely. I think the fact that one of our most recent mass shootings was another one where children died, and that should be a clear indication that gun reform is immediate and is absolutely necessary. But it doesn't. It hardly moves the needle. So that goes to the fact that, like, when it comes to policy, it's like even a mass massacring of children is not enough to make somebody look at an issue and say what can actually happen here to make what can we actually do to make change. They're just still going along with well, I need my gun. And it never goes past that simple argument, it's my right. So I don't know how to change that. I don't know how to, well, I guess one thing is, like I said, is if certain conversations weren't so taboo, to force conversations out into the open.
Yeah, no, and I think that whenever this comes up, I know that it's always worth touching on the idea of how many people it does impact their life and just how many don't know. You're talking about the taboo of it, and probably women that just would never tell anyone, even a husband of 30, 50 years. There's that just they feel like the way that they'll be viewed thereafter. And then in terms of obviously in terms of gun reform, there was the conversation kind of happened after Sandy Hook that it was like, if that didn't do it, then I don't know that anything ever will. And I think that the shooting last month, it's just another.
The shooting last month, if nothing else, defies the argument. Only thing to beat a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, and it's like, okay, so now clearly we know that doesn't work.
That doesn't work. Yeah, and as that story continues to just get worse, as bad as it was, when you realize the way that the response was handled versus the way the response was supposed to be handled. I agree on that. Scott, sort of on the same topic, but I want to take this as an opportunity to talk a little bit about the Congress passed yesterday what was the most significant federal gun restrictions since the assault weapons ban, which obviously expired. So it will strengthen background checks for the youngest buyers, close what they call the boyfriend loophole, and incentivize states to pass red flag laws. That sounds like the least you can do. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of the least you can do. But even getting that passed, is certainly something that seems you have to take it as a victory, even if it's not even if it's not enough. It's something that wasn't in place, and you can make a case for the 14 Republicans that voted in favor of it that they're either retiring or not up for reelection, but they still did it. I mean, they if they follow the party line, the idea is you never vote for anything that benefits Democrats. So what are your thoughts on this new gun bill that the House is expected to I was going to say ratify, but I don't think that's the right word.
Yeah, no, the House did today, so now it does go to President.
They did it already. See?
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm. They did. Yep. So it passed.
So it's now law is what that means. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because it's going to Biden's desk for signature. Yeah. So, I mean, look, again, it's so weak. It's I guess you could say it's better than nothing. But to me, all it does is it's just a little bit for, again, Republicans to go back and be like, see, we did do something here.
We compromise.
To all the people that were saying this was going to be bad again for them for the midterms because they were being, too pro-gun after this horrible massacre last month in Texas. But it's just political theater, and it's just a way for them now to go back and say we did do something where, like you said, Christian, it was pretty much the least they could do.
Yeah. And
there's a lot more work that needs to be done, especially after the Supreme Court with their ruling yesterday. It's really just political theater. I mean, it doesn't change the day to day. And that's what's, again, so ironic and hypocritical is yesterday it's like, oh, nope, states can't decide what's right for them. But today it's like, oh, no, states are the only ones that can decide what's right for them and not federally. So I'm glad something happened, but unfortunately I feel more just jaded in the sense that it was just done out of political theater, like you said, with just the bare majority of Republicans that weren't really at risk. They didn't really have to go out on a limb to do this, to just be able to say for a talking point in the midterms to the moms out there in the swing districts and the moderate districts that, oh, look, we did do something for your kids. See, we didn't just sit back. Whereas it really doesn't go far enough to deal with the real issues as to why we have the level of gun violence that we do. I mean, again, no other place on the planet has it like we do. So it's beyond mental health and other things. It is the proliferation of guns and the type of weaponry that we allow out in the streets that we never should. So it's a start, but it's not going to change the day-to-day, and we have a very long way to go to be able to get there while still balancing the Second Amendment. So,
and let me ask you guys something.
Go ahead, Tamara. Yes.
So there was an artist shortly after the Uvalde massacre when they put out these photos of these people who just have these like massive arsenals of guns. I don't know if you've seen it, but it would be like a family out on their porch, and just like every inch of yard is covered in every single gun that they own. I don't know. Have you seen those?
I have not seen that, but
not directly.
Surprised I haven't seen it. I'm sorry, Scott.
No, I was saying the same thing. I'm surprised I haven't either.
Well, so the point of it was just, I believe it was an artist, a European artist, and they were just showing that see what what was your mentality when you believe that you need this amount of guns, and those the people who those guns belong to kept going back to the argument of we have the right, we have to defend ourselves against a tyrannical government. It's the tyrannical government, as if this day is going to come when a tank is coming down your driveway and you're going to have to defend your family and your home. And I is as silly as that scenario sounds to me, I just think, why don't they imagine that if this tyrannical government is coming for you, they're not coming at you with weaponry. They're going to erase your social security number and your identity and freeze your bank. It's all going to be like digital warfare. The gun is going to do absolutely nothing to protect you from this
Right.
scenario
And
when the
also,
government comes for
if
you.
for argument's sake, if 5 people live in your house, let's say you have 200 guns, can you use more than 10 of those if there were to be an armed assault? Let's just say
Right.
everybody needs 2. This is just for argument's sake. Yeah, no, I mean, it's there is that fear that they're going to come and take away all of your guns, and
Well, just
yes,
take taking your home, or I mean, I don't even
taking
know
your
what the
home, and yeah, taking your
raising up against the tyrannical government. They're going to
Well,
try
I
to
know.
take your property and take your home, and this is what's going to stop them from doing that.
Yeah,
Right.
go
I was
ahead,
going to
Scott.
say, if beyond, like you said, Tamara, which is true, it would be a quiet coup kind of thing. If it was a legit like armed thing with the military government, I'm sorry, but the military industrial complex that we've
Not
put billions and trillions and trillions and trillions through the years is going to roll right over
You're gonna
your
win.
guns. They will take all of your guns if they want to. So you can have, like you said, thousands of guns, and it does not matter, because
Yeah.
the government, if it was turned in that kind of capacity, is going to take it over. It may be, slow, but they're going to come by with those tanks and they'll roll right over your house. I mean, it's just it's just such a crazy sort of just a paranoid argument of that's going to happen. And like you said, it's going to be more of a quiet coup. But again, it's completely perverting what the intention of the Second Amendment was to begin with, and it's taken to a level that it was not all intended to be. And that's the whole point, the bottom line. So taking that and then trying to usurp and say it's going to be because the government's going to come in is just completely paranoid and completely wrong way of looking at it.
Also, I mean, when it comes to the notion of a militaristic government takeover, uh, it's very easy to just think back about a year and a half ago, and how unsuccessful any kind of efforts like that can be in terms of stopping the actual government. And as it's interesting that we've been doing the show for almost 40 minutes, and government hearings on basically an attempted coup is really pretty far down in the show. That's not number one, but it's not really a new story. It's just the hearings in and of themselves are new, and the three of us have talked regularly enough about this, and what we think about that day, about January 6th, and the extraordinary efforts President Trump and some of his inner circle took in terms of trying to situate fake electors and things like that. I don't know that we've learned a ton. I think that in some instances, it's just a lot of like, oh, you've learned a little bit more about things that you maybe already knew. Like, Rudy Giuliani gets drunk. Yeah, I knew that. That's okay.
Yeah.
I
Well,
definitely.
there's been a lot of people in Trump's camp admitting that they knew that the election was not fraudulent, that it was a fair and true election.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest of those, of course, would be Ivanka Trump saying on camera that that they knew that, And then, of course, it's like, yeah, I mean, what did she know?
Exactly. Like the people that they've been listening to this entire time, telling them that this election was false, are now saying like, oh, it actually wasn't. Like this is real.
Yeah.
But the damage has been done. The people who believe them, they're not like, oh, okay, I guess I guess it was a fair election. They're not changing their mind.
No, I think that you have some people that could be swayed a little bit, but Scott, obviously, there are people that have their mind made up that the 2020 election was stolen, and even President Trump coming out and saying, like, yeah, I kind of made that up because I didn't want to stop being president. That still wouldn't dissuade some people, right?
Right, which of course he never will.
No,
No,
I know he never would, but it's
It
like
wouldn't.
even that.
No,
So
it
it's
wouldn't.
like, yeah,
It's again, we're not in the times that we were before with Watergate, where like we've talked about this ad nauseum. Like you had 3 stations that people all tuned in, had the same information given to them. You had your newspaper, and that was it. You did not have any other places that would go validate your opinion, no matter how outlandish it is, which you do now. So no matter what they do with this committee and these hearings, it's not going to move the needle at all, which we've talked about. It's very sad that we are in a point in our history now that it will not change a thing. And it doesn't matter what kind of evidence they show. It doesn't matter how many Republicans or Republican secretaries of state go on and say that it was a valid and fair election and Trump lost. It doesn't matter what happens there. It is not going to change people's opinions or their thoughts. It's really sad, and it's dangerous too. It's dangerous to think that that's where we are now.
I think that's President Trump calling.
Does
right
somebody
now.
have a landline?
It's my old phone that's hooked up to the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, because Scott's actually he's connected to us. He used the America Online CD to dial in, and he has call waiting, and that's how he's able to do this. Yeah, look, I think that you have people who you had to be in any way swayed by what's coming out of these hearings. You have to have at least thought like, okay, yeah, this happened. Maybe there are people who thought, well, this happened, but it wasn't as big a deal. Or people who thought like, well, this happened, but they stopped them. I think that those people you could nudge just a little bit that maybe they need, but for the most part, yeah, you're having, and I mean, again, twice in an episode, another thing that President Trump has said is that the fact that there are none of, yes, there's Republicans on the panel, but there's none of his Republicans, that they didn't, that McCarthy didn't have anyone that he put on that panel. It was Liz Cheney, who is persona non grata now to Republicans.
It's so mind-boggling to me that not only just her position as being number 3 of the Republican leadership at the time, but the daughter of a 2-term vice president who was so actively involved in Republican administrations dating back the past 50 years. I mean, it's just mind-boggling to see how far this party has fallen and how it would not have taken very much for them after January 6th, like we talked about right here on this podcast, about barring Trump from being able to run for office again, regardless of his criminal history or whatever happens if he gets prosecuted, which he won't. But even if he did, like they could have done the simple thing of barring him from office and being able to hopefully get their party in a better place. But instead, they couldn't even do the bare minimum of doing that. And now we're still stuck with dealing with the garbage and of that person, and now is continuing to pollute that party. And it's again a scary place to be, because if we can't even convince people of facts anymore that we all agreed upon at one point in time, it just makes everything a lot more dangerous. And not even just on the right. Like I've said all along, you could get someone who's charming on the left and do the same type of thing and then be successful. So it's dangerous for our country's democracy to be able to get to this point where we can't even agree on basic facts anymore, and to allow somebody to continue to run roughshod over it and potentially allow him to run for president again is just mind-boggling to me. And it's just insane to think that we're here in our history that this could even be a possibility.
Go ahead, Tamara.
The fact that we are 2 years away from a presidential election, which is no time, And neither
Yeah.
party has a candidate of anybody that would, the Republicans have Trump and DeSantis, who both of them could not win an election. Biden certainly could not win re-election. Kamala
Right.
can't win re-election, or she's not going to
She
win.
she couldn't win the
She
presidency, right?
couldn't win the
Yeah.
presidency if Biden steps down. Neither party has a winner right now, and I feel like this is what's terrifying. It's like what could possibly happen in 2 years? I have absolutely no idea.
Right, and I think that on the Republican side, it's easier to figure that nobody wants to step out there and say that they're running until they know for sure that maybe Trump isn't. I think if it was clear that he wasn't, and it was only DeSantis, I think a lot of people are like, oh, I mean, if anything, I look better on television than DeSantis. So that's, it's not going to look to out debate Ron DeSantis isn't going to be that hard. And I wish our pal Sam Whitfield was in the chat because he lives in Florida, and I know that he at least had. I don't want to say that he's a fan of DeSantis, but he has. There's a lot of what he says resonates with Sam. So at some point. We'd love to actually have Sam sit in with us. I think that would be fun.
I think that would be great.
But just to sort of explain what it is. I mean, because I agree with you. And I mean, I think that a ruling like today, I think sticks with people, and in a presidential election, it could be very easy to kind of point back to you want somebody that can kind of help you with this thing from 2 years ago. But I don't think Biden's the solution. And I don't know. I don't even know that he really wants to run. I don't even know that he wanted to run this time. He didn't in 2016. And then he's like, all right, I guess. But but yeah, I mean, there have been a lot of times where you can kind of point to someone that's up and coming. And then unfortunately what happened was in 2020, a lot of those people did run, your Cory Bookers and Pete Buttigieg. And so I don't know who you can point to that, that isn't already in some way tainted, just in terms of people already have the impression.
Yeah.
But
Scott, you're so good at history.
Yeah.
Has there been an election 2 years prior to a presidential election where we had no idea who the candidates could be?
Oh yeah, and just to add to that point, I mean, look, if you go back to 2006, nobody really knew Barack Obama. I mean, yes, he was, had done the keynote, but nobody really knew him or thought of him as a viable candidate. And like I've always said too, it's going to shake out to who ends up winning some of these elections in the midterms. Who are those people that may come out of those elections and be able to run? When you think about it, are there going to be people that are a senator, a governor in a moderate state? Are there people that are going to run in other areas that are going to become the next up and comers? So, and that's for the Republicans too. So it definitely has happened. We're just in such a 24/7 hyper fast focused social media world. But yeah, many times in the past you didn't necessarily know, and a lot of times people moved up very quickly. Like when you think about
like Bernie
Theodore
Sanders
Roosevelt,
did, certainly.
well, no, I'm saying in history, when you think about Theodore Roosevelt, when William McKinley first ran in 1896, he was not really known outside of his area. But then he went to the Spanish-American War. Next thing you know, he's running for governor of New York State. He's there for less than 2 years. They appointed him, had him become vice president in 1900 when William McKinley's a VP died. And they did it out of a way just to get rid of him. They thought, oh, the vice presidency job is so terrible. And then then William McKinley gets assassinated. He becomes president. Even Franklin Roosevelt. I mean, a lot of those folks didn't have long jobs, until they got a little bit closer. I mean, yes, he ran for VP in 1920, but he wasn't really known. And then he becomes governor also of New York, and then runs for the presidency 2 years later. So there are a lot of people that are still out there that may not have much more than a local or even state type notoriety, but they will get to be known, especially after the midterms in 2022. I just think we're at a weird time where you have an incumbent that could run again, that is choosing not choosing, he hasn't announced yet, he said he is, but could put more than likely not run again because he's going to be in his 80s. And that's the first time that, in a long time that you've had an incumbent choose not to run for re-election, you have to go way back for that. So that is unusual if that does occur. And to have multiple back-to-back one-term presidencies like this, you have to go back, to the 70s, nearly 50 years to see that as well. So,
but credit to Jimmy Carter for not like running in 1988 or.
Well, no, I was just going to say, hey, Jimmy Carter could.
Yeah, he still could. Yeah, that's right.
He's eligible. He'll be 100 years old.
Look, we've said that on iterations of this show where it clearly it wouldn't have been as crazy as it seemed at the time. In the chat, right? Our friend Farad Muhammad, he says, it amazes me that out of over 200 million people of age, our quote unquote best options for 2024 are people who couldn't win dog catcher in a municipal election. I saw somebody else post, could we just try somebody, I don't know, under 60? Just let's see. Like, let's just have both parties, sort of like a handshake. You know what? We're both going to put out somebody who's, maybe just at 60. It doesn't even have to be under 60.
I would say
like
under 70
or under. Yeah, no, I know. Under 70 would be realistic, but I'm like, can we just go crazy and go under 60? Because Clinton and Obama
DeSantis
were both
isn't that old. How old is he?
DeSantis is 43.
Well, no, he's younger than me, so clearly
he's very.
You got to at least be older than me if you're going to run for president. Well, there you go. So that's
DeSantis Buttigieg election in 2024.
So I don't know. I think it'll be interesting, but just to sort of tidy up on the January 6th committee hearings, to me, the one like truly fascinating. Well, the first was Ivanka on camera saying like, "Nah, we all knew," but that's true. But the fact that there was this documentary that nobody seemed to know about, but like everyone sat for this camera crew, and like there's the great outtake where Trump is like, yeah, let's get rid of the water. Let's get rid of the table. You know what? Bring back the table. You know what? Put the water on, but don't put the lid on it. Now get rid of the coaster. It's just like that level of like, it's before he even starts talking about anything. So, that is kind of an interesting takeaway that like, it's like, wait, what do they have here? And just Farad following up, he's waiting for the first Gen X president. I'm willing to wait a little longer to see the first millennial president. I mean, I guess at some point we would have to get a Gen X president unless they just skip right to a millennial president. But I think because you need to be 35 to be president, I don't know that we can have a millennial just yet.
Yes,
but
the oldest millennials are 42.
I was going to say Pete Buttigieg is technically a millennial.
He's a millennial.
Born in 82. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, going back to the thing that facts don't matter anymore, there were a lot of people that were saying, well, Ivanka was forced into saying that, on camera.
Right.
Or, so they will still say, oh, she didn't really mean it. She was told to, or she was, it's just, again, mind-boggling that we're in a post-factual world that even she can say it on camera under oath and people will still think that she was manipulated in saying that or doing that, or she's part of the big machine and the conspiracy. So it still doesn't matter to those folks.
That was my point, that if there was President Trump on camera saying it, it would be like, he didn't mean it. He had to say it,
Right.
And of course he never would, but that's neither here nor there. When I was putting the show together today, I had asked my friend Caitlin if she would be able to join us. For people who watch some of the other shows here on the Blackcast YouTube channel, she does a lot of Marvel and other shows with me, and she did want to be here. And she wrote something that it'll take me a few minutes to read, but I thought I would end the episode by reading. This is our friend Caitlin Cornell, who you may know from some of the other shows. And in speaking of the Supreme Court ruling, she wrote as follows. She asked me if I could read this, and I said that of course I would. So she said, today's ruling is a massive blow to women's equality and human rights. Yes, the argument is being made that states' rights are more flexible and free than a federal decree. That thinking is incorrect in the case of underrepresented groups. We've been excluded from the Constitution by its interpretation. The fight for rights is the fight to be recognized and protected by a document that white men naturally see themselves in. Every amendment and court decision in this vein is the argument for, quote, add us, we matter as much as you, unquote. If it was assumed from the start we would not be here, it would be a no-brainer, a non-starter. The next step is to make it impossible for the courts to deny our rights on the basis of sex. We need to push our leaders to reopen the ERA vote because at this moment, we have all states required to pass. That will give a constitutional foundation for the ACLU to bring a new case and pass reproductive rights as a matter of equality under the law as opposed to privacy with a doctor. This is the reason guns have more rights under the law, and corpses arguably have more bodily autonomy than women. To the conservative argument of protecting the rights of the unborn fetuses, I need you to hear me when I say that is not our goal. Just as you didn't like to be told to wear a mask or get vaccinated, we deserve to make decisions about our health and financial well-being. These women are alive, and women of color / poverty are most vulnerable. 30% of these women who are forced to carry to term will end up below the poverty line, sentencing mother and child. Many women who are unable to carry to term for medical reasons or miscarry unimaginable emotional pain. These must be reported to state by a hospital, and women could be investigated if it was truly a miscarriage or not. Women are in jail right now for this very reason. It will prevent women from seeking medical treatment, therapy, or worse, to find their own solutions and possibly die. Quote, it is essential to women's equality with man that she be the decision maker, that her choice be controlling, unquote. Ginsburg told senators during her 4 days of questioning by the Senate Judiciary Committee. If you impose restraints that impede her choice, you are disadvantaging her because of her sex. Also from the late Justice Ginsburg. And finally, Caitlin writes, the fight of a past generation of women is our fight now. Many of these women who are alive to see their work undone. We must continue that work, and we must win again because others are counting on us to protect the foundation of their civil liberties. Obviously, if Caitlin were here with us, she would have done her words more justice, but I did want to give her a chance to speak in absentia. And then obviously we can always continue this conversation in any of the ones that we've had today on the show. I know that we've been gone for quite a stretch, but we plan to show up when we can over the summer. So please subscribe to the Blackcast YouTube channel and look for new episodes of Biden Time. And again, that's BLADTCIST. In the meantime, Tamara, how can people keep in touch with you?
You can find me on social media at Hey Tamara.
And Scott, at some point, you and Mitch McConnell get back into it. And when you do, where can people find that?
And on Twitter at SMan80, that's SMan80.
Thank you, Tamara. Thank you, Scott. Thanks to everybody in the chat. We'll see you next time. Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye.